favorite app store or visit mymitv.com. All Michigan, streaming everywhere. My Michigan TV.
Looking for the perfect weekend getaway? Love Lansing like a local. And we promise, you'll love Lansing just as much as we do.
You're watching My Michigan TV.
It's time for Lehto Live. Join author, historian, radio host, and YouTube sensation Steve Lehto as he breaks down Michigan's top stories, talks with business leaders and professional experts, and checks out the variety of statewide festivals and events that Michigan has to offer. You're watching Lehto Live on My Michigan TV.
I woke up this morning and I thought to myself, oh, another Monday. And I realized, wait, today's Tuesday. Somehow I got a day ahead of myself. It was feeling like a Monday to me. What can I tell you? So right now it's about 35 degrees outside. It's going to hit a high of 38, but it's sunny out, just sunny and blue skies as far as the eye can see. I'll take that. Now, they are calling for snow on Friday and a high of 31, but that is the only day in the 10-day forecast where the high is below freezing. So we are in the home stretch. We are approaching spring real fast, and summer can't be far behind. So I'll take it. Living in Michigan, we got to get used to all kinds of wacky weather situations, and I'm fine with the winter we've had so far. Now, I mentioned that last week, tragic news hit the Finnish community, and I am of Finnish descent. My last name, Lehto, is actually Lehto in Finnish. And my great-grandfathers, when they came to America, all spoke Finnish, as did my great-grandmothers when they came also. And my great-grandfather's last name was Lunger, and it actually got shortened when my grandfather entered the military. It was not Ellis Island that cut the name in half. It was the military. But as part of the Finnish community, my family's got a real close connection to a school in Hancock, Michigan, which, by the way, is also honored by this shirt here of the Quincy Mine, which was the mine just outside of the town of Hancock. And in Hancock's a school which for years was known as Suomi College, founded in the 1800s by Finns, and originally was just a seminary. But then they expanded to become an actual school, college, university, you name it, they got it. And they were in business up until right now. They just announced they're closing permanently. Now, there are some people in the community who are holding out hope that there might be some way to save the situation, but it's not looking good. But among the things that are happening at that place, there's a school, okay, a university, there's students, there's faculty, there's buildings, but there's also the Finnish-American Heritage Center. And it's a building that houses the Finnish-American Archives, also houses the Finnish-American Reporter, which is a newspaper that's published monthly about Finnish things in America. And there is simply the Heritage Center itself houses an art gallery, and then it also houses a meeting space where they often conduct things of importance to the Finnish community, the school, or both. And so when I heard about this the fact they were going to close the school. It was very upsetting to me, although I never went there. But my father and my mother both went there. My grandfather taught there. I was also the dean for many, many years. And so Suomi College and then Finlandia, as they knew it in later years, was always an important part of my life. And so when I broke the news to my dad on Thursday night that they're closing the school, it was a shock to his system also. So the good news is there are many people now rallying around trying to help as best they can. And there's an organization called the Finlandia Foundation. The Finlandia Foundation is not related to the school. It's just, uses the same name. But Finlandia University and the Finlandia Foundation National Organization have announced their intentions to preserve the history and heritage. They're going to work together. So while the school is, in essence, going out of business, the Finlandia Foundation, which is national, has a lot of people in it and a lot of people who want to support this and want to do what they can to save the foundation and save the Heritage Center, which contains those things I told you about. So the story I'm going to tell you about is from WLUC TV 6 out of Marquette. Finlandia University and the Finlandia National Foundation, which is based in California, of all things, have announced their intentions that aim to ensure the preservation of Finlandia University's Finnish-American heritage and history after the school closes. The nonprofit Finlandia Foundation, founded in 1953 to connect, inspire, and strengthen the Finnish-American community in the U.S., has commissioned a task force and mission to preserve Finlandia University's Finnish-American Heritage Center, its archives, the Book School, the Art Gallery, Northwind Books, which is a bookstore, and the monthly publication, the Finnish-American Reporter. I forgot about the folk school, but the Heritage Center puts on classes not for students per se, but for the community. So if somebody in the community, for instance, wants to learn more about their Finnish heritage, they'll often have classes at the center and also language classes. We are certainly grateful beyond my vocabulary to the Finlandia Foundation for stepping up in our time of need, being as generous as anyone could ever expect, and then, says the director and the editor of the Reporter, David Mackey. He's the director of the Finnish-American Heritage Center. I know him. He's a very, very nice guy. To allow us the opportunity to potentially find a way that the work we've been doing here for years will continue for future generations. The announcement between the two parties follows the news announced last Thursday that the university will not enroll students for the 2023-2024 academic year. School was established in 1896 as Suomi College. Finlandia University is the only remaining institution of higher learning in North America founded by Finns. There have been a couple other schools, including, I think, one that predated Suomi College, but none of them are in existence anymore. Finlandia University is incredibly pleased that we've been able to partner with Finlandia Foundation National in order to move toward the preservation of the entities that are the most unique part of our history, which is our Finnish heritage. And that's the president of the university speaking there. Knowing that the Finnish-American Heritage Center and Archives, the Art Gallery, the bookstore, the folk school, and the Finnish-American Reporter have a chance to continue the legacy of Finlandia and Suomi College gives us all a significant ray of light in the midst of the darkness of losing our beloved university. We cannot express our gratitude to Finlandia Foundation National enough for their generous support. Since its grand opening in 1990, the Heritage Center has become a community focal point and a national center, offering a folk school, art exhibits, lectures, plays, musical programs, and community events each year. Archive at Finlandia's Finnish-American Heritage Center is home to the most extensive collection of Finnish North American materials in the world. They have hosted me on several occasions. I've spoken there about the Italian Hall disaster and my book, Death's Door. I've also spoken there when the documentary Red Metal came out on PBS. We actually showed it at the Finnish-American Heritage Center before it was broadcast on PBS. We got permission from PBS to have some preview showings of it in that area. And I thought it was extremely important to show the documentary at the Finnish-American Heritage Center because more than half the victims of the Italian Hall disaster were Finns. And so it's extremely important in our community. So I'm very glad that they're working on this. Also have to point out that the bookstore, although it is a school bookstore, also has a huge collection of books of importance to the Finnish community. And as you can imagine, if you go into your Barnes and Noble and look for books in Finnish, you're not going to find them. You might be able to order them online, but if you want to page through one before you buy it, no. But if you go to Northwind Books, they've got them there. And I've also mentioned that the archives houses all kinds of stuff. I did a ton of research there on my book about the Italian Hall disaster. But I mentioned my great-grandfather was a poet. He wrote poetry. And his printing press, he actually printed the stuff himself and sold it. His printing press is in the archives. It was donated by my family to the archives as just something that should be in their collection, because my mother also donated a full collection of the poetry that my great-grandfather wrote. And so it's a neat story to say, okay, here are the poems this man wrote, and here's the printing press he printed them on. He actually set his own type and printed these things off and then stapled them himself and rode his bicycle around and sold them. You know, and also my mother had some of his handwritten poems before he typeset them. And it's fascinating stuff. And don't get me wrong, we published a book of his poetry. You can get the poetry now. And so to read a poem, you go, oh, that's a poem that Elu Kiviranta wrote back in like 1907 or something, right? So you can read the poem. But when you see the handwritten poem in an archive, and then there's the printing press that they were printed on, it just brings it to a whole different level. The Finlandia Cultural Campus, described by President Pino, is the Smithsonian of Finnish America, says FFN President Anne-Marie Pastor. This is the essence of why Finlandia Foundation was founded 70 years ago, to preserve the culture and history of our roots in Finland while making the connection with the current and future generations. Our board of directors has unanimously agreed that Finlandia Foundation must make the preservation of these assets a priority on several levels. The irreplaceable archives must be maintained at the Heritage Center, which donors entrusted with their treasures. The living culture of the folk school offers unique experiences, and the very fine monthly Finnish-American Reporter links our community across the country and even internationally. And the heritage of Finnish America is integral to the identity, livelihood, and lifeblood of our community. It's too precious and too important. Keeping it alive is aligned with the mission of Finlandia Foundation to keep Finland in America. The center's art gallery currently has a university faculty exhibit on display with works by Finnish artist Camilla Vuorenmaa to be exhibited from April until June. She'll be bringing some very large-scale plywood paintings to Finlandia University Gallery, says the director, and she'll also be collaborating with the Finnish-American Folk School to provide a workshop to our local community. They added that the rescheduled faculty exhibit opening reception will take place on March 23rd at 7 o'clock. More information about Finlandia University's intentions and next steps are available from their website, which is finlandia.edu. Finlandia.edu, that is the school's website. And the Finlandia Foundation was founded in 1953, and they champion the culture and heritage across the U.S. by supporting educational opportunities and promoting diverse, relevant, and enriching programs. So I'm hoping that at least they can save the archives and the reporter and the bookstore and the center. That would be nice. It would be even better if they could save the school. But it sounds like they're too far along in the process of shutting it down. And The sad part is that most of us didn't know they had problems until they made the announcement they were closing. And I've spoken to people in the community who said, gee, if we'd known this earlier, we might have been able to do something to try to help out. You know, I don't know, raise some money perhaps. There are a lot of Finns in this country. We're scattered about. We don't make a lot of noise because we're quiet by nature. But we could have possibly done something to save the school. So it's very sad, but at the very least, the Finlandia Foundation National has announced their intention to do everything they can to keep the Finnish-American Heritage Center alive and preserved. We'll be right back after this on My Michigan Television.
The heart of winter. It beats inside you. It's that thing urging you outside when the forecast calls for snow. Some were born with it. For others, it was carved with care. But for all who take winter to heart, it's time. Feel the rhythm of the season and pursue your Pure in Pure, Michigan.
I've been on the road, out here with the squad. Everybody trying to go, yeah, the party jumping up. Hey, we putting on a show, trying to catch a vibe. We do this every time, like, na 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 na. This is where I wanna be, na na na. Never ever gonna leave, na na na. You ain't gonna get it from me. I'm like, na 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 na.
My Michigan TV is streaming everywhere on Apple TV, Roku, Fire TV, and more smart TV apps. My Michigan TV is on your phone too. Take us with you wherever you go. Just search for My Michigan TV on your favorite app store or visit mymitv.com. All Michigan, streaming everywhere. My Michigan TV.
Remember when there were all kinds of balloons up in the air, causing all kinds of consternation? It seems so long ago, doesn't it? It's always funny how something will hit the news like that and become all the rage for about a week, 10 days maybe, I don't know. All I know is that there was a time when balloons were in the news and they shot a couple of them down and a couple of them might have gotten away. And then the question becomes, what was going on there? Well, it turns out there's a Michigan connection because at least one balloon passed through Michigan airspace and then got shot down. And now we're hearing that the U.S. military spent about $2 million to shoot down those aerial objects. And we're being kind because an aerial object sounds a little bit more clinical than just a balloon. But Melissa Nan Burke wrote for the Detroit News that the U.S. military spent between $1.6 million and $2 million last month to shoot down 3 unidentified high-altitude objects over North America, with half of that spent on the mission over Lake Huron in Michigan, the Air Force said Monday. And it turns out that that balloon is drifting over Lake Huron towards Canada. And so it may have gotten shot down even in Canadian airspace. I'm not quite sure. There's been some confusion about that. But we are protecting our Canadian brethren, our neighbors to the north, from the incoming attack of the high-altitude objects unidentified. That price tag covers only the cost of 4 AIM-9X Sidewinder missiles. Those cost between $400,000 and $500,000 a piece, and that's if you can find them for sale. You and I can't buy them, but that's what they cost. They were used to shoot down the objects, according to Air Force spokesperson Ann Stefanak. And keep in mind that the cost of those missiles is up there. But scrambling jets is expensive also. Jets use a lot of fuel. And every time you put more airframe time up there, you got to maintenance and things like that. So not included in the $2 million total are the cost of the flights to find and shoot down the objects, or the cost of the search efforts to recover debris from the objects. Because number one, they pick it up on radar. Number two, they scramble the jets. Number 3, they fire those expensive missiles. Number 4, they send someone out to look for what they shot down. All of that is expensive. Right now, we're simply talking about the cost of just the missiles. The U.S. Coast Guard suspended its search in Lake Huron amid poor weather and did not immediately have a cost estimate for the search available. When asked, officials have said that the debris was not recovered. So what they shot down may have taken its secrets to the depths of Lake Huron. The February 12th mission to shoot down the object over Lake Huron cost the most among the 3 missions because the first missile missed and harmlessly landed in the lake before a second missile hit the target, said the Joint Chiefs Chairman, General Mark Milley. So here's the question. That means there's a missile down there laying on the bottom of the lake. Can somebody just go and retrieve that? I'm not sure you'd want to retrieve it, but it's interesting to think about. The other Sidewinder missiles used to bring down aerial objects over Alaska and the Canadian Yukon Territory successfully knocked those objects out of the sky on the first try. The White House last month was pressed on whether the military shoot-downs were an overreaction amid reports that an Illinois hobby club was missing its weather balloon. Well, I have a question for you. If you're in that Illinois hobby club, have you guys gotten clearance to be launching balloons that just randomly float around up there where we fly our airliners? And what would happen if a 707 were to ingest one of your weather balloons? I'm just curious. Absolutely not that it wasn't a waste of money, according to the National Security Council spokesperson John Kirby. Given the situation we were in, the information available, the recommendation of our military commanders, it was the right thing to do at exactly the right time. The last high-altitude object had passed over Wisconsin, Lake Michigan, and the Upper Peninsula before it was shot down about 15 nautical miles east of the UP in Lake Huron. An F-16 fighter jet from an Air National Guard unit based in Duluth took the successful shot at 2:42 p.m., February 12th, at about 20,000 feet. That was on the U.S. side of the border, officials said. In leaked audio from the F-16 cockpit, the pilot described the object as octagonal-shaped and about the size of a four-wheeler, a four-wheeler. The president defended the handling of the 3 high-altitude objects following the downing of a much larger Chinese surveillance balloon on February 4th off the coast of South Carolina. President said the U.S. has no evidence the 3 objects shot down over Michigan, Alaska, and the Yukon were Chinese spy balloons or surveillance vehicles, but they don't know what they were. So if you don't know what they are, you kind of got to shoot them down, I think. Intelligence community's current assessment that these 3 objects were most likely balloons tied to private companies, recreation, or research, studying weather or conducting other scientific research. He added that they acted out of an abundance of caution when he gave the order to shoot down the objects due to their potential hazards to civilian air traffic, and because officials could not rule out that they were surveillance. Michigan's congressional delegation last month wrote the defense secretary requesting a classified briefing as soon as possible about the unidentified aerial phenomena that passed over the Upper Peninsula and that was shot down over Lake Huron. According to the U.S. Senator Debbie Stabenow's office, that letter has not yet gotten a reply. So they've asked for a briefing, which they said they can do in secret if they'd like, and they have not gotten one. But you'll have to go back and remember at the very beginning when they spotted the balloon that they identified as of Chinese origin. They said, there's a balloon, it's from China, it's floating over American soil, and we think it's a spy balloon. People were all up in arms about they should do something about it. So they shot it down. Then people were all up in arms going, why'd they shoot it down? Well, you can't have it both ways. Now, I understand that people will get up in arms about everything. There's probably some organization out there that fights for the rights of balloons and is saying that no balloons' rights should be violated. I assume there's such an organization, but I could be maybe exaggerating a little bit there. But the point is, if we don't know what it is, and there's nobody on board of the thing you're going to hurt, you got to take it down. Now, spending that much money, $400,000 to $500,000 to take it down, might seem a bit much. I think a lot of these aircraft have got other things they could use to poke holes in a balloon, but I'm not going to get into the efficacy of which weapons they actually used, but there was a Michigan connection to it. So had to mention it. It's 11:24 on a Tuesday here at My Michigan Television. Just a reminder that we've got a new show added to the slate of shows here on My Michigan Television. It's My Kitchen with Jake. My Kitchen with Jake. It's an hour-long program. Right now, it is simply something you can watch on demand. Just go to the website, My Michigan Television, check it out. And there it is, My Kitchen with Jake. And it's cool. It's about cooking. It's about Michigan. It's about My Kitchen with Jake. So check that out. Now, we do have a summer coming up, or so they tell me. And the question is, how many people will travel this year? Well, according to the experts, and yes, there are experts on these things, nearly 80% of Michiganians will travel for this year, says AAA. And I have to tell you, the Detroit News used that headline with that word, Michiganian. So I get pushback whenever I call us Michiganians as opposed to Michiganders. And Michiganders, besides being silly, was originally intended as an insult. And Michiganian actually makes more sense. But they do use that word. So nearly 80% of us will travel this year, says the AAA. More than 3/4 have travel plans this year, according to a recent AAA survey, and many are kicking off their journeys with spring break trips far from the northern cold. According to the Auto Club Group's new survey, 79% of Michigan residents plan to travel this year, a big jump from just 62% last year. According to the report, 28% of Michiganders are planning a spring break vacation, up from 24%. And there they've used Michigander. Now, should you use both in the same story? I wouldn't think so. But the headline is more important than the story. AAA expects one of the busiest spring break travel seasons in years, says Debbie Haas, Vice President of Travel for AAA. Previous spring travel seasons were affected by COVID. However, Americans are largely more confident about traveling again. And AAA has been very strong, or has seen very strong bookings for beach destinations, cruises, and attractions. For spring break, beach vacations, Hawaii and cruising are the most popular among trips, according to AAA survey. Florida is the top domestic destination with its beaches, theme parks, and cruise ports, according to the surveys. A lot of people go to Florida. Ships heading to the Caribbean, Mexico, and Central America top the list of AAA cruise bookings for spring break, while cruises sailing to Alaska, Canada, Northern Europe, and the Persian Gulf are also on the rise. Now, when I read that sentence, the first half of it made complete sense to me, and I thought to myself, who is going on a cruise to the Persian Gulf? Is that really a thing? Yes, so. AAA travel bookings show a 30% rise in international spring break bookings compared to last year. More people are getting up and getting out and traveling farther, farther. And I know people now who are traveling to other countries who wouldn't have imagined that a couple of years ago. It might not have been possible a couple of years ago. But somebody reminded me the other day, they said, you understand that 3 years ago, COVID hadn't happened yet. 3 years ago. Because remember, I believe it was the Friday where they announced all the big closures. And I believe that was about Friday the 13th. And that was right around when everything started happening. And that would have been 3 years ago, right about coming up on now. So time flies. Now, another way you can travel, of course, is by bus. Bus travel used to be big. It's not so big anymore. And it's still out there, though. And I saw this headline about Megabus. And Candace Williams wrote this for the Detroit News. A company called Megabus has expanded its routes from Detroit to Toronto and 4 other Canadian cities. So let's suppose you're in Detroit. You'd like to go to Toronto. You don't feel like driving. How are you going to get there? You can get there by Megabus. Megabus said they're expanding their routes with daily trips from Detroit to Toronto with stops in 4 other Canadian cities. Schedules are available and tickets can be purchased for travel starting April 5th. So jump on a bus, go to Toronto. Why not? The announcement comes less than 2 months after the company, which is based in New Jersey, started talking about fares as low as $1. And they announced their return to Detroit with connections to 13 other cities. This latest expansion involves a partnership with Trailways of New York. It will allow for 2 daily trips between Detroit and Toronto, including stops in Windsor, Chatham, London, and Paris, Ontario. It's according to the bus line's website, a one-way ticket from Detroit to Toronto on April 5th is $45. So $45 plus a booking fee of $4 will set you back $49. So jump on the bus in Detroit. $49 later, you're in Toronto. That's not a bad deal, right? And I assume that the trip back will cost you about the same, maybe less if you buy it as a round-trip ticket. So they said, we're pleased to be able to leverage our partnership with Trailways of New York to expand our service. That's the vice president of commercial for Megabus said in a statement Monday, offering cross-border service between Detroit and Toronto is a new and exciting opportunity for Megabus that will allow for several new travel options for our customers this spring. Megabus returned to Detroit in January. The company said it left back in 2020 when it ceased operation, in part due to the pandemic. So, like I said before, there's a time where people used to travel by bus, by train, a lot more than they do now. And there are still trains that travel from the Detroit area to, say, Chicago and back. And a couple of years ago, I had to go to Chicago because I wanted to sit down with my publisher and talk to him about something. And I was poking around doing the calculations on how long the trip would take and so on. And I realized I could drive to Chicago, and then I got to navigate the streets of Chicago. And then I got to find a place to park my car, and then walk over to my publisher's place and hang out there for a while, and then reverse the process. And then I thought, I think there's a train. There's a train. And actually, there used to be a train station at the end of the street I grew up on. The station is still there, but now it's a restaurant. I talked about that about a week or so ago. And but they still stop in Birmingham. And that train stops in Birmingham and then Royal Oak and then Detroit and then Ann Arbor, but it works its way over to Chicago. So I decided, I'm going to take the train. And I hadn't been on a train like that in decades. And so got on the train, and I remember the tickets weren't that expensive. Got on the train and sat down, and it's kind of like being on an airplane, except that there's more room. And you get up and walk around, and there's a meal car. You go back there and buy some food or snacks or whatever you want. And there's the scenery going by that you get to watch. And yeah, it stops from time to time, and you do find yourself, we're slowing down. More people are going to get on, so people are going to get off, and we're going to pick up speed again. But number one, the scenery is interesting. But number two, it's very mellow. And when you're driving, you don't pay attention to this as much. But when you're driving, you often are kind of keyed up because you got to keep track of traffic around you and pay attention where you're going. And you have to maintain a heightened mental state. And on the train, I didn't have to do that. So when I got to where I was going at the other end, made it over to my office, my publisher, got back, came back, and I thought to myself, that was kind of cool. That was kind of cool. So trains and buses are coming back. Who knew? Who knew? We'll be right back after this on My Michigan Television.
We've all been looking forward to a return to normalcy, especially when it involves a breath of fresh air, a dip in the water, the chance to explore, or just the opportunity to take a break and enjoy the view. Our time is now. Start making your plans now to visit Ludington at pureluddington.com.
Don't miss out! Download the My Michigan TV mobile app to stay up to date with all of our programming.
We've talked lately about a whole bunch of different situations where car companies have gone and shopped around to different states and said, we're going to open up a battery factory or a motor factory or an assembly line. What can you do to attract our business? And the states will then compete and try to land these factories. And South Carolina is now offering $1.3 billion to a company that will make Scout electric SUVs. And this is a whole nother story. Jeffrey Collins wrote this to the Associated Press. South Carolina's governor said yesterday he's going to ask lawmakers to approve nearly $1.3 billion to bring to the state a new electric vehicle plant by a Volkswagen-backed group trying to revive a brand that was the 1960s forerunner to today's SUVs. Because some of you are thinking, wait, a vehicle called a Scout. Do you remember who made the Scout? People my age know. International Harvester, or often called International, made a vehicle called a Scout. Now, they were more well known for their tractors and farm implements, but they also made a few automobiles. They also made a thing called a Travelall, a station wagon that my family owned two of. Hideous vehicles. Scout Motors, Inc. and South Carolina officials announced plans to start building new Scout vehicles powered by electricity for the first time since 1980. They hope to hire 4,000 workers for their $2 billion plant. Scout is banking on nostalgia combined with an expected boom in electric vehicles. International Harvester made gas-powered Scout vehicles in the 60s and 70s. Their shape and features continue to influence modern SUVs, and Scouts have had a niche fan base of collectors ever since. In the competitive fight to land electric vehicle plants, South Carolina is trying to join its neighbors, providing billions of dollars in taxpayer help. Georgia offered Hyundai $1.8 billion in incentives for its first U.S. electric vehicle plant near Savannah. North Carolina looks like they're offering a Vietnamese automaker more than $1 billion in help for their first North American electric vehicle plant. South Carolina is determined to be a big player in the electric vehicle industry and all the things that go along with it, like making batteries. The governor signed an executive order in October asking the state Commerce Department to aggressively court businesses involved in the industry and give them a point of contact that appeared to work with Scout. Company officials said they wanted to act fast. They reached out to 74 potential sites across the country, and South Carolina sealed the deal in 2 months, says Scout Motors president Scott Keogh. Some states were still shuffling paperwork after 60 days. This state had action, he said. He's also CEO of the independent company headquartered in Virginia and backed by Volkswagen. Scout's new plant will be built north of Columbia along I-77. Groundbreaking and site work could begin this summer, and the company hopes to have 4,000 workers and vehicles rolling off the assembly line by 2026. When fully running, Scout Motors hopes to be making 200,000 vehicles a year, exporting them as well as selling them in America. The $1.3 billion in state help would go toward building a new interchange for the plant on I-77 and a railroad bridge over the highway. There'd be other improvements to sewer, power, and roads, as well as grants the company could use for whatever it wishes to get the venture off the ground, according to the South Carolina Commerce Secretary, Harry Lightsey. The state General Assembly will need to approve the incentives. Leaders in the Republican-dominated House and Senate appear to be fully backing the project. They said that adjusted for inflation, the investments made by states and foreign automakers that started making cars in the U.S. in the 1990s were similar. They always have said you have to spend money to make money. Time has proven those are wise decisions. Usually, and I'm adding the word usually, So let's not forget about Foxconn in Wisconsin, company that said we're going to build a gigantic facility to make some products. And the facility got built, but not as big as it was supposed to be. And they didn't start building what they said they were going to build. And then everyone's blaming everybody. But of course, the money's been spent. So the governor compared Scout Motors' attempts to bring a brand with nostalgic ties and backing from an established automaker into the new electric vehicle industry to Japanese car makers in the late 80s introducing the luxury Lexus and Infiniti models. This is a unique moment in history, he said, calling Scout's business plan bold. As we started to understand the company's vision, we realized what a match this was for the state of South Carolina. Scout Motors' decision to build near Columbia means each region of the state will have a major automaker. BMW has been building vehicles near Greenville since '94 and is investing $1.7 billion to prepare to make electric vehicles there. Volvo began making vehicles at a plant near Charleston 2 years ago and also plans to begin converting to some electricity-powered models. The governor said it is important to spread economic development across all areas of the state. This is the missing ingredient that is going to set a spark of prosperity in the Midlands, he said. So South Carolina getting a Scout plant. And just the fact someone's going to start building the Scouts again is pretty cool. I hope that they're true to the old version, because the old Scouts were really, really cool vehicles. And if they do a good job of bringing that forward, but simply electrifying it, that would be very cool. And I'd love to see what that vehicle is going to look like and how it's going to operate. Meanwhile, back here in Michigan, there's a state park I've never been to, and I'm embarrassed to admit this, but I've got friends who've said, Steve, you know, from time to time, we should go mountain biking. I go, yeah, let's go mountain biking. Mountain biked all over the state, up north, down south, you name it, I biked there. A friend of mine once said, Steve, we got to get up to Fort Custer Recreation Area. They got a lot of good riding out there. And I never made it. But Fort Custer Recreation Area Campground has announced that they've got some improvements coming along, but they're going to have to close for a while to get them done. So closed for remodeling, okay? Fort Custer Recreation Area Campground to close for improvement projects. From the Free Press, they'll close for almost a year, the campground, in September to complete 2 infrastructure improvement projects. Now, this is obviously a little ways down the road, but it's a big project. The park is located in Augusta between Battle Creek and Kalamazoo. It'll close on September 11th and is expected to reopen in July of the following year, according to a Michigan DNR post on their Facebook page. The entire electrical system in the west loop of the campgrounds, sites 1 through 110, and both the restroom and the shower buildings in the park will be replaced. We apologize for disrupting fall camping plans, but this is the best construction schedule for getting these important projects done with the shortest campground closures. Timing of the closure means the campground will not host its annual Harvest Festival. Due to the ongoing underground wiring issues, electrical service will be unavailable at 10 sites during this current camping season. The East Loop's electrical system was replaced back in 2018 when 29 of the campsites were upgraded to 50 amp service. The latest projects will be funded with a portion of the $250 million in American Rescue Plan Act funds that were made available to the DNR to help address critical needs in state parks and trails. And I know a lot of people who've never camped, ever. And I know people who've camped a little bit, but not a whole lot. As a little kid, my family used to go camping up north, and we did it in the style where we had a big old tent, jokingly called it a circus tent, big old canvas tent. You'd unroll it on the ground, you'd assemble it like an erector set, and before you knew it, you had this big box of canvas with a door on one end. You zip open and closed. And then we'd put bunk bed cots in there, I kid you not. And we'd sleep in there. And my mom, on more than one occasion, took the boys camping by herself because my dad had business to attend to. So it was 6 boys and my mom in this tent at Twin Lakes. And so we were doing it with the tent. And we did have a Coleman stove that we could fire up with propane. My mom would cook breakfast on it, sometimes make us lunch on it, whatever. But we thought, roughing it. There were people who had bigger tents. And of course, people had RVs. Now, RVs were not as common back then, but people had them. Or they had trailers, kind of thing, pop up, for instance. And we used to always make fun of those people, like, oh, they think they're camping, but they're sleeping inside that vehicle, right? Funny how your perspective changes. Now you go camping, and if you pitch a tent, you still feel like you're doing old school. And yet, there's somebody who's got a $250,000 RV with slide outs and big screen TVs and a satellite dish, and they pull it up and they plug it in and connect it all up. And it's basically a rolling house. Now, when I was a kid, I thought, well, that's the cheating. And really, what are you accomplishing by doing that? But of course, it's different. There's some people who like the camping experience where you're in a tent and at night you can hear the wildlife and you can hear the wind and you can hear animals. And if it rains, you can get wet. But I understand now, having slept in a sleeping bag in a tent as an adult, I understand why people buy these things. Now, I'm not saying you should buy an RV because that's another story altogether. But the point is, there's something to be said for having the comforts of home wherever you go. But nowadays, campgrounds are so elevated from what they were when we were little kids. So, for instance, even if you're sleeping in the tent in a sleeping bag on the ground, there is a bathroom facility with showers and hot water and electricity. You can plug stuff in and you can do stuff. And the sites have power. So you want to plug something in and use it, you can do that too. It's a whole different ball game. So if you haven't camped in a while, you should take a look at it. And it's kind of funny because I was camping a couple of years ago and I told some friends who were passing by that I was at this campground. They said, oh, we'll stop by and say hi. And when we were talking to them, they're looking around going, wow, this is so different than what I was expecting. And in particular, Michigan has got some beautiful campgrounds, absolutely gorgeous campgrounds. Some of them are in great locations, like the one at St. Ignace, the north end of the Mackinac Bridge. If you're interested in doing the bridge walk, you camp there, you walk over and you walk the bridge. It's that close, and it's on the beach. So you can walk from your campsite to the beach at the north end of Lake Huron. And it's just the perfect site to be camping in the UP, but there's dozens and dozens of other ones. Years ago, I told you my family, we camped at Twin Lakes in the UP up near Toivola. And as an adult, a couple of years ago, I actually drove through that campground. And it was so bizarre seeing it as an adult because I have these memories when I was a little kid and that campground seemed so huge. It's huge. It's not that big of a campground. It's a nice campground. It's on a really cool lake, had so many memories there when I was a kid. But things change over time, So the good news is that even if you're using a tent these days, modern technology, you can buy a tent you can throw on the ground and have fully assembled in about 5 minutes and fully staked down and ready to use in about 10. And you can take it down just as quickly. And I remember pulling into a campsite at Hog Island State Park just at dusk, and my family scrambling to assemble that circus tent in the dark. I remember thinking to myself, we might all be sleeping in that car if this doesn't work out. But my dad and a couple of my older brothers figured it out and got it working and got the tent up. But it's unbelievable. But yeah, so if you're planning on camping at Fort Custer Rec Area, you got to get your camping done this summer because they're closing in the fall until next summer to upgrade all the electricals at the park. And they do that from time to time. So we'll be right back after this on My Michigan Television.
My Michigan TV is streaming everywhere on Apple TV, Roku, Fire TV, and more smart TV apps. My Michigan TV is on your phone too. Take us with you wherever you go. Just search for My Michigan TV on your favorite app store or visit mymitv.com. All Michigan, streaming everywhere. My Michigan TV.
We are connected to our Lake Huron shoreline, all 93 miles of it. Hidden bays and marinas dot our shores. Points of entry to our world. Open waters and waves, alive with people at play. Inspiration floats on sparkling waves. We are in awe of its strength and in love with its allure. We nurture it, play in it, savor it. Huron County Waters.
Meanwhile, in Detroit, Mayor Duggan has launched a gun violence prevention program. And he's going to be talking about this at the State of the City address he's going to give shortly. Dana Afana wrote this to the Free Press. The mayor is expected to announce a new federally funded crime prevention program at his 10th State of the City address tonight at the Michigan Central Station. The community-based violence intervention program, known as CVI, is aimed at preventing and reducing shootings and homicides in defined areas, ranging in a 3-mile radius, with help from local organizations known for intervening and mediating situations involving public safety. The program will be funded through the city's $826 million in American Rescue Plan Act money. We've seen over the years the number of homicides fall, but the violence is too high. When you have the whole law enforcement community, they'll run an operation on an area, but they can't stay there, and doesn't change the culture. The deputy mayor told the Free Press, with these community organizations, they'll be able to stay there within that area and work on providing wraparound services and change the culture of violence within communities. And that really is the key, okay? If you simply arrest people who commit crimes, that doesn't solve the root of what's causing the crimes. The Center for American Progress last year reported that CVI programs have proven to be effective in reducing gun violence by 30% in cities such as Chicago, Baltimore, New York, and Philadelphia. This year, as of February 27th, there were 37 homicides and 109 non-fatal shootings in Detroit. Meanwhile, the deputy who previously served as the Detroit Police Department's first assistant chief said the program will be similarly structured to the city's Jump Start program. The city will issue a request for proposals soon after Duggan's speech for local organizations to submit their ideas on how to prevent crime. More details, including the amount of federal funding, will be announced at the State of the City, which is scheduled for 7 o'clock tonight. Crime data related to shootings and homicides across neighborhoods will be shared with organizations that win bids, and they'll be responsible for choosing areas where they may have connections to reduce and prevent crime. The city will measure performance among the groups based on the reduction of shootings, and there are financial incentives for getting good results. These groups are oftentimes able to reach individuals of the community that police can't reach or government can't reach. They have a certain effect because they're from the streets. I know this. I retired from the Detroit Police Department for my 27-year career. I've had to call on various Detroit organizations, nonprofits, and everybody else to say, we need your assistance. The chief said the program comes at a good moment heading into summer months, which historically have been the more violent months related to gun crime. We need community involvement. We need our community to help us with this violence problem that we have. It's a really big deal. I've talked on this program before and had guests come on and talk about what they're doing to try to turn things around in Detroit. Detroit's a very, very large city geographically. Its population has declined over the years. It actually got very close to hitting 2 million at one point decades ago. And the numbers have fallen off ever since. And I think it's now well below 1 million, but it's still a large area geographically. So it's a lot of things that play into what causes crime, what situations give rise to crime, what the environment is where crime is likely to occur. And it's very, very complicated. It's almost like a big mathematical formula. And you cannot solve it by simply fixing one thing. So if you simply said, if we could arrest every single person who committed a gun crime the moment they did that, it would solve our problems. No, it wouldn't. Because more people would commit gun crimes because there's some reason they're doing that. So you got to look at all the other things that are going on. So we've had people on this show before who said that they've picked small areas of the city and they're doing what they can to revitalize those little areas. There was the charity that was buying up homes one at a time and finding basically abandoned, bombed out homes and restoring them to livability, and then selling them to people who wanted to live there. And by doing that a home at a time, they could revitalize a city block, a city neighborhood, and it got to the point where they were actually doing this. They're reversing some of these trends that create the environment that is so, unfortunately, good for crime. And again, I've talked about this many, many times. I remember going downtown Detroit over the years. And in more recent years, if you start at the base of Woodward Avenue, start driving north out of the town, you start seeing all kinds of improvement and things that have happened over the years. And none of it happens overnight. And not any one thing solves the problem. It's a huge, huge ecosystem, everything that plays into it. And I like this approach. Obviously, you've got to have law enforcement. You've got to fight crime. But you've got to ask yourself, what's the situation that leads so many people to commit crimes? And sometimes, quite often, it's people who live in a place where they don't see a future. They don't think that they're promised anything, that if they were to go out and try something else, that it would work. And so, unfortunately, that's all they've got. And so it does come down to making better schools, right? Having people who care about the communities and the neighborhoods, keeping the areas clean. You know, these things all are part of the big picture. So the mayor is going to announce that they're looking for community help. And I hope that people in the communities will step up because, you know, a lot of people left. That's where these abandoned homes come from. And a lot of people leave and a home gets abandoned. Next thing you know, is blight on that block. And then property values fall. And the next thing you know, the people who can't leave, their homes are becoming valueless. You reverse that trend. You clean it up, fix one of the houses, somebody moves in. And the guy who was doing that with the homes I talked to a while back said it got to the point where banks were happy to lend again in neighborhoods they'd stopped lending to. And that's one of those side effects that you wouldn't have predicted necessarily, but when it happens, you go, that's a good sign. So the communities and the neighborhoods have got to step up. And hopefully there's people down there who will do it and answer the call at the State of the City address by the mayor tonight. So we'll check in tomorrow more about what he says specifically. That's going to wrap it up for me today right here on My Michigan Television. I'll see you tomorrow, Wednesday at 11 o'clock, as I always do, until noon. Until then, behave yourself. Bye-bye.
My Michigan TV is streaming everywhere on Apple TV, Roku, Fire TV, and more smart TV apps. My Michigan TV is on your phone, too. Take us with you wherever you go. Just search for My Michigan TV on your favorite app store or visit mymitv.com. All Michigan, streaming everywhere. My Michigan TV.